I'll start with everyone who's here now. Thank you all for joining. We are the Circular Electronics Partnership, or CEP in short, and we're delighted that you can join us today. This will also be CEP's launch event for our Circular Electronics System Map, an industry blueprint for action, which is the concluding perspective of the CEP community after a year-long reflection on the question, what defines circular products and services? This is me. My name is Carolien van Brunschot, and I lead the CEP Secretariat from Geneva, Switzerland. You won't be hearing much of me today, however, since we have an amazing list of speakers, which I'm honored to introduce to you as we go. The next 90 minutes will consist of three main sections: an introduction to CEP, and the work that has been carried out to develop the Circular Electronic System Map, a presentation of the key findings of the system map, and then the multi-stakeholder dialogue, in which we will dive deeper into how we can take the industry perspective of the necessary system that enables circular product flows as a starting point, and understand how industry, scientific community, international organizations can better collaborate to make this future system a reality. We had all the intentions for a Q&A from the audience with the panel, but over the course of the past 2 weeks, we realized there is so much fascinating content to share from our side that we're afraid there actually might not be enough time in this call. We still invite you to write your thoughts and your comments in the chat box, since we would love to hear from you what is on your mind and what your thoughts are around this. But I'm afraid that I only see a very slight chance that we will in fact have sufficient time for an audience Q&A. Our sincere apologies for that, but please do share your thoughts. A few quick housekeeping notifications. This session is being recorded. All participants are muted, and we will make the recording and the slides available after the event. As mentioned, please leave your thoughts and considerations in the chat. You can see here how. We will definitely go through after the webinar to hear what was on your mind. And if we do happen to have extra time, we may still pick out 1 or 2 comments for discussion.
Carolien, could we share the screen shared, possibly?
I am so sorry. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rally. Is it visible now? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So, well, with all of that out of the way, there wasn't that much on the previous slides anyways. With all this out of the way, I will start with a very brief introduction of the Circular Electronics Partnership as an organization, and I'll briefly touch on how this work fits into our broader agenda. First of all, e-waste. E-waste is among our fastest growing waste streams globally, and currently just badly managed. Only 17% of the waste is formally collected and recycled, and over 80% is landfilled or processed informally. This is leading to environmental issues such as soil and water contamination, but also health impacts on populations involved in informal e-waste recycling. The current management, or rather mismanagement, also leads to missed economic opportunities. The 2020 Global E-Waste Monitor estimates that the value of total raw materials in global e-waste is approximately 57 billion USD, mainly coming from iron, copper, and gold in equipment. In addition, some of the minerals embedded in the electronics are considered critical raw materials, some of which are getting scarce, but at the same time are essential to power our global energy transition. I am speaking of materials like tungsten, tantalum, and of course lithium, but there are many more. Making matters worse, ongoing digitalization, especially during COVID-19, sees a push for companies and consumers to go more and more digital. In developing markets, digitalization and the wider use of electronic devices is also driven by improved accessibility and affordability, which has major advantages when it comes to safe and sensible development, but will also have some major consequences for our ever-growing pile of e-waste, as well as the resources that are needed to manufacture all these electronic devices. As e-waste is this industry's specific symptom of our general take, make, waste economic model, one of the answers is a circular economy for electronics. An economic ecosystem where, instead of extracting more resources from the earth and disposing our old devices in landfill and incineration, We actually reuse all products, parts, and materials to their highest residual value through formal collection channels, and reuse, refurbish, remanufacture, and recycling cycles, ensuring that they circulate back into the economy after end of life. Many materials and electronics last for much longer than the lifetime of a product, and we need to ensure that we can benefit from using those as long as possible. All partner organizations in CEP that you see here on the slide have had circular economy for electronics high on their agenda for years. In end 2019, we realized we all work with an overlapping pool of private sector companies on similar projects. Not only did we realize working this way, we risk in overlapping initiatives and duplicating work, but even more counterproductive, actually, we have the potential of running projects with contradicting outcomes, which can be frustrating for the organization, for the participants, and generally adding to the confusion in the collective space, instead of actually driving convergence. So from that moment onwards, we started looking into the opportunity to, instead of running our own individual initiatives on circular economy for electronics, to organize ourselves in a way that strengthens all our efforts by offering the industry a more holistic and coordinated approach through this partnership. As you can see, the founding partners of CEP are the Global Electronics Council, the Global Enabling Sustainability Initiative, the International Telecommunications Union, the Responsible Business Alliance, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and the World Economic Forum. With the partnership, which is hosted by WBCSD, our partner organizations still offer the same value and initiatives to their memberships, but now through a coordinated approach in which each contributes through their own value proposition. We do this all with the CEP roadmap at the heart of everything that we do. The roadmap was developed over the course of 2020 through a combined working group of over 30 companies in the industry. The roadmap outlines 40 actions across 6 pathways that are spread over the product lifecycle. During this collaboration project, these actions have been identified as necessary to collectively address the main industry-wide barriers for companies to move ahead on their circular ambitions. The 6 pathways that you see here on the screen are phrased as a call for stakeholders to, first of all, design for circularity, to drive demand for circular products and services, to scale responsible business models, to increase the official collection rates, to aggregate for reuse and recycling, and to scale secondary material markets. After the launch of CEP as an industry platform in 2021, we now see that out of the 40 open roadmap actions, 14 are already being addressed through projects that either have started already, that are planned to start later in 2022, or that are in the pipeline to get addressed in the coming months. Some examples of these 14 projects range from developing guidance to IT purchases for private sector and institutional buyers, to the development of an EHS standard for the recycling sector, and from mapping data needs for digital product passports to consistent measurement for circularity throughout the industry. This is just to name a few, but with 14 projects, there is more going on. The boost in this activity in a time frame of only 18 months is a clear demonstration of the momentum that CEP's private sector members have gathered to address these transitional barriers towards a circular industry. This community of companies that you see here on the slide provide us with a wealth of knowledge and expertise, fueling the projects that we run. They help us in understanding what is needed to make the industry move. We welcome new members to join, especially those that represent different parts of the value chain and different geographies. So if you're interested, feel free to get in touch. The one action that sits at the heart of everything else on the roadmap became CEP's first project starting last year in the summer. Define what constitutes a circular product and service. Before we embark on addressing 40 systemic issues out of the roadmap with 35 different organizations, it only makes sense to make sure that we're all on the same page about some of the basic concepts and terminology. Spoiler alert, through the many virtual work sessions, we had to very quickly conclude there is no such thing as a circular product. It is the system that allows this product to be reused, repaired, and recycled that determines whether a product is actually circular or whether it ends up in landfill. To understand what we are working towards beyond 2030, we need to collectively understand and shape what that system will look like. This North Star description of the circular electronic system map is what our CEP working group has been working on and is now publishing today. We are happy to have both a partner and a member representative from that working group here to give you an insight into why this system blueprint was necessary and in what context it was developed. I am delighted to welcome to the call Sheila Gobertina von Trapp, Director of EU Marketing and Outreach at the Global Electronics Council. And joining us directly from Climate Week in New York, we have Paige Mose, Head of Global Sustainability at Dell Technologies. Dear both, thank you so much for agreeing to dial in and to share your perspective. Sheila, if I may start with you, could I ask you to maybe provide a brief introduction of GEC to the participants and then continue on why this partnership and the Circular Electronic System Map are important for your organization?
Absolutely. Thank you, Carolien. It's a pleasure to be here for this exciting launch of the blueprint. The Global Electronics Council, also known as GEC, is a mission-driven nonprofit dedicated to accelerating sustainability and circularity within the electronics industry. We also manage the Tier 1 Eco-Label, EPEAT, which assists purchasers with identifying credible, sustainable technology products and services. There are thousands of registered EPEAT products from manufacturers and brands globally. GEC is proud to be a founding partner to the Circular Electronics Partnership. As partner, we recognize the value of collaboration with and knowledge sharing between CEP partners and members in our combined efforts to move the industry towards circularity. An example being the launch of this blueprint. GEC participated in this project's working group discussions. For the past year, the working group, which combined of both CEP partners and members, have held regular calls and contributed to reviews and input of the document. I personally enjoyed the in-depth discussions we had. Now, the blueprint is finally complete, and it's great to be a part of this launch. Our hope is that the document will be useful in our collective understanding of what constitutes a circular electronics product, and what Carolien more specifically said, the respective system needed for these products to circulate. This is very important for being able to take actions for change we need at scale. I look forward to seeing how the blueprint is utilized and to hearing from the rest of today's speakers. Thank you very much for this opportunity just to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you very much. That brings me to Paige. Paige, it is great to have you here. Thank you for joining us live from New York. Given that your organization doesn't really need a whole lot of introduction, could you just tell me why this work was important for Dell? And could you also paint a picture of the process in which this shared industry perspective was put together?
Absolutely, and I'm so honored and excited to participate today. Thank you again. This is an exciting day to launch the first CEP project report. It's a wonderful achievement, and it's a culmination of a lot of hard work. I personally participated in a couple of the work streams early on, and it was just delightful to really dig in with others on this really important and complex topic. You know, as stated earlier, I'm in New York this week for Climate Week. There's a lot of energy around circularity as a key enabler as well. So we're doing the real work and the heavy lift to make a real difference for this earth. You know, I can tell you that from Dell's position, it's also really been gratifying to participate in CEP and experience the learning and growth from the very first stakeholder meeting in Switzerland through the roadmap and pathway development to today, where we see the launch of this project. And, you know, Dell has felt for many years that circularity of electronics needed focus and expertise. And we're really excited to participate in the CEP as an early member. Back in 2019, Dell launched our new decade of goals to 2030. And we were really happy to also see that our engagement with the CEP, that there are aims and pathways that were very well aligned with our approach. But we also knew that we needed to lock arms, and we could lock arms with others to advance as a collective. When we launched those goals, we really had a 3-part specific circularity goal. One, that for every product we put out by 2030, we would take back an equivalent product to reuse or recycle. 2, that we would have 100% of our packaging made from recycled or renewable material. And 3, that more than half of our product content would be made from recycled or renewable material. And like many other members that have very similar approaches to goals, we knew that we had to have alignment, demand, engagement, and collaboration with others to achieve. It's a complex set of work, and Dell cannot, or any of us cannot, achieve those goals and make a real difference in a vacuum. So I know that this year there's been participation in a few different projects. One that we proposed and investigates a challenge that we and other producers are facing in scaling up things like recycled plastic material supply and demand to achieve our future recycled material content goals. We are a few months from project completion, but have already seen benefits from working on challenges as a focus group with some of our supply chain partners. And we look forward to seeing that potential that the CEP has to break down barriers and make a real difference to our aim of becoming a more circular company. And as Carolien mentioned, when work was started on the CEP roadmap, one of the points we kept coming back to, which was common across the 6 pathways, was the definition of circularity and what it means for products and services. And as we collectively discussed the issue further, it became, it began to evolve from more than just a simple written definition of a circular product or service into a set of attributes within a larger ecosystem of enablers that collectively define circular products and which products and services can realize their circular potential. And this future-facing approach to circularity really highlights the roles and interdependence of products and services in a future business model. It's important to call out that this report reflects collective inputs from all of the participating members, and that was the really exciting part about being a part of this. I want to say a thank you also to all of the partners that collaborated with the members to get this done, and also to Accenture, who's done a great job in facilitating the workshops where all the members' experiences and concerns were heard, and a representative narrative was created in the form of the report. We at Dell are really proud to have participated and look forward to continued involvement with the CEP in the years to come. Thank you again for the opportunity today to talk, and more exciting work ahead.
Thank you, Paige. Those are some really nice words about CEP, but it's really great to hear that Dell feels so comfortable within the environment, and that it's really seen as useful. Thank you. So thank you both for clarifying how and why this work was developed. Next up, we would like to share some key insights that resulted from this exercise and ultimately ended up in the system map. This work was extensively supported and developed with Accenture. Maximilian Krempel, Accenture's sustainability strategy consultant, played an instrumental role in leading the dialogue and synthesizing the perspective from the working group. Unfortunately, he is in bed with COVID and he could not be here today to help us make sense of some of the key insights that emerged over this year-long project. Oh, apologies for that. While we wish Max a speedy recovery, we do have Timo Gosler from Accenture Sustainability Strategy to take us through the key elements of the work and the publication. With him at the virtual table, we have 2 working group representatives who, together with their teams, have been essential in getting this blueprint articulated with the wealth of experience from the industry that we've had. You can see on screen, we have Natasha Skotnicki, Program Manager for Circular Economy at Cisco, and we have David Hirschler, Senior Director of Sustainability and Legislative Compliance at ERI. Thank you all so much for being here. Timo, can I ask you to take us through the key findings of the work from here?
For sure, and thank you very much for the introduction, Carolien, and good afternoon to everybody from sunny, but now quite autumnal Vienna, actually. Let me start by thanking the full working group really for the fantastic and valuable collaboration over the past year. For us at Accenture, it was a great pleasure to work together on this important piece, not only because it was fun and we enjoyed the collaboration, but also because we really, really strongly believe in CEP and the vision that is put forward by the blueprint that we're discussing today. Thanks also from my side now to Tasha and David for co-presenting with me now some of the insights from the report. We will talk about 4 key questions in the next 20 minutes. We will first talk about how we define circular electronic products and why the circularity of a product depends on a system. We will then discuss what the systemic enablers for circular electronic products actually are, and finally reflect upon some key considerations for setting them up. Let's now please move to the next slide and start with talking about the definition of circular electronic products. Electronic products, in fact, include a wide range of products, from smartphones to washing machines to IT servers and so forth. While these products are in fact very diverse, the definition applied by the working group now allows to subsume all of them. The working group and the blueprint understand circular electronic products as products that fulfill 3 important attributes that span across the full product lifecycle. 1, the product uses circular resources. 2, the product is designed for circularity. And 3, the product is actually recovered at the end of its lifetime. If we go to the next slide, please, we see that the first 2 attributes that people often think of when talking about circular products, the use of circular resources and a circular product design. A circular electronic product is made from circular resources, in contrast to a linear electronics product that mainly consists of fossil and mineral virgin resources. Circular resources comprise both secondary components, parts, and materials, as well as renewable raw materials. What is important to highlight is that this definition also expects circular resources to be verified. This means that information on the resource's provenance, the chain of custody, and properties are available and accessible to all relevant actors. Additionally, a circular electronic product is designed for circularity, that is, to be durable, repairable, upgradable, resource efficient, and recoverable. The design needs to strike the right balance between these characteristics, as well as consider trade-offs with other product attributes such as performance or safety. In any case, a product's design can fundamentally impact the decisions and actions of various stakeholders during the use phase or at the end of life, such as consumers or recyclers. It's therefore a crucial enabler for circularity. However, no matter how much a physical product is designed for circularity, if the product is not used efficiently and ends up in a landfill, it's no better than a product with a more traditional design. Therefore, the working group's definition of a circular product includes a 3rd attribute that is less commonly considered: the actual collection and recovery of the product at the end of its life. The recovery can happen at the component, part, or material level, and it includes activities such as component reuse, refurbishment, remanufacturing, or recycling. The 3rd attribute actually also requires that a product's inherent value is exploited to the optimal extent before its end of life by actively optimizing the product's lifetime value through the right balance of activities such as maintenance, repair, upgrading, reselling, or even sharing. Different value retention and value recovery strategies can be applied for sure during the use and the post-use phase as well. And there's no silver bullet answer for how to best balance and combine them. Solutions will have to be very context specific, but it's still a clear message from the blueprint that without actual and proven value retention and recovery, a product cannot be considered circular. Now, this 3rd attribute is obviously setting quite a high bar. It means that at the time of sale, the question of whether a product is circular or not cannot be answered conclusively, since the actual use and end of life are still to happen. Does this now mean that companies can actually never market their products as circular? No, this is not what it means. Following the definition, it rather means that companies will have to provide proof and assurance that the value retention and value recovery are secured if they want to label their products as circular. It is important to highlight specifically that the 3 attributes imply requirements beyond the physical product. They actually imply requirements to a full product system. And if we could move to the next slide, we raise now the question, why is a product actually depending, why is the circularity of a product actually depending on a system? And what do we mean when we say product system? We basically mean the interplay of the product and other additional elements, such as services, actors, infrastructure and technology, and to some extent also regulation. It's a key implication of the presented attributes that circular products cannot exist without the right circular system to support them. David, may I ask you to please share with us a few reflections on the related working group discussions, as well as examples for the dependency of products on a supporting system?
Of course. Thank you so much, Timo. And as everyone else has said, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, as well as both on the CEP working group, which has been quite an incredible group of stakeholders. I actually see the member list of CEP as almost the perfect example of why a circularity can't be a single product item. We needed input from not just the manufacturers and the brand owners, but we had retail, we had members of upstreams, including mining operations, and as well as end-of-life providers such as us and other both reuse and recycling providers, simply because it can't all be done in a vacuum. There's no one entity that can just fix and solve a problem on their own. When we look at the system, one of the things that was discussed in the working group is how are people supporting or sourcing materials from in order to create their products to become more circular. So the infrastructure needs to be set up not just to collect material, but also then to bring that material to where the production is happening and to adjust the design of your product based on the type of material and the source of material that exists. So we may be bringing in material into our facilities that's 10 years old. And so we have to create a system that can then bring that material out to manufacturers who can use that supply. When we're looking at regulation, we need to look at regulations that enable us to connect our supply with the upstream supply in order to, in a global economy, we need to make sure that you can make those connections. It's no longer as easy as if I collect it here, I can simply ship it to a manufacturer and done. There's about 10 to 15 steps along the way, at least, if not more than that. So, and the connection of stakeholders. When we talk about a product design, it's not just designing the look and the feel and the functionality and the security, but it's also meeting with these other stakeholders and players and determining where, how do I create my product so that then that material can end up being resent into the system, being dismantled properly so that I can make it a more circular product. And on top of that, there's also the question of whether or not the longevity of a product and how do you input the longevity of a product into your circularity. So many manufacturers are selling their material, but the sale of that material is not the first step. They need to know that it's then going into secondary markets and it's moving across the globe and moving into other uses. And that needs to be taken into account in order to determine how that material or the product of that material is going to come back into the system.
Thank you very much, David. I think this was super helpful and super sharp to explain why the circularity of a product actually depends on a system. Thank you very much. Now, to continue, I guess the logical next question is, how could a system look like that enables circular products at scale? And to answer this question, CEP and its members have worked out and prioritized 12 systemic enablers that you can see on the slide here. 3 for enabling circular resources, 2 for enabling circular design, and 7 for enabling actual recovery. First, there are 3 enablers for products with circular resources. In a circular system, a functioning market for verified circular resources helps to align supply and demand. Standardization drives critical mass in the system, and digital, physical, and biological technologies ensure the verification of the origin and the properties of resources. Second, there are two systemic enablers for products with circular design. In a circular system, electronic manufacturers approach product design collaboratively, involving the relevant upstream and downstream value chain actors. Additionally, they integrate circular thinking deeply into their product development via the right processes, tools and data, governance, and organization. And finally, there are 7 systemic enablers for products with actual recovery. In a circular system, marketing and sales models are aligned to circular properties and offer circular incentives. Services such as repair or upgrades are available during the use phase, and customers are incentivized to return the products at the end of the life cycle, and they are also enabled to do so via widespread collection networks. Finally, reverse logistics, sorting, as well as disassembly and recycling are set up and executed in an efficient and effective manner. Almost all of these enablers are connected with each other. They cannot be tackled independently or in isolation. Therefore, we will speak in a couple of minutes about how companies could apply product lifecycle planning to design a holistic circular product system. But before we do that, now I would like to hand over to you, Tasha and David, to dive deeper on a couple of these enablers. And Tasha, if you may want to start, could you please share a few insight and reflections into the working group discussions around these 12 enablers?
Sure. I'm going to highlight a bit more under attribute 2. So I think, Timo, you touched on a high level, thinking about circularity in the product development means key principles. So aligning around design for upgradability, for resource efficiency, thinking about design for recyclability, repairability, reuse. So those are key principles, but in order to make that happen, you have to have this cross-value collaboration, which is the second enabler you'll see. Really to further illustrate David's points around the system, if you think about, we need to get feedback from our recycling partners in terms of the demand around parts harvesting and where we need to make sure the modularity is happening so that it's very easy at end of first use, or when we're looking at recycling. We also need to think about repair. So one thing that's come up in terms of feedback from our repair services is like one of the conformal coatings that's part of the PCB is for waterproofing, but it makes it very challenging on the repair. So elevating that as a priority as we think about design and working with our manufacturing partners in terms of other substitutes, what can we do? So there's a lot of feedback we need from different partners, similar to end of life, recycling, repair. We also need to think about then how we can feed into attribute 1, the circular resources piece, because as we think about potentially the infrastructure and the flows to come from recycling to new materials, or making closed loop materials ideally, that's critical. The infrastructure and flows have to be in place, and having that great coordination between part of the ecosystem that's beyond the OEM coming up with the design. So I think there's just, themes that you've heard throughout the working group identified these enablers, and it's critical to cross the intersection, as well as just, again, the system piece, because we just can't have the impact we want if we're only focusing on design and isolation. It has to be with the partners. They're then making that happen on the back end.
Yeah, and I think that touches on exactly the enabler I was going to talk about, was the fast and cost-effective reverse logistics. We can bring in all the material in the world into our facilities, but in the end, we have to make it a commodity, make it a product, and get it to where it needs to go in order to feed back into the building and manufacturing process. So it's really crucial on our end as a collector to be able to not just bring it, process it, but also work with the manufacturers and this system, the CEP system, to determine those common standards and determine how we need to prepare our material to then get it out as fast as possible in a consistent and ongoing flow. Without that return into the supply chain, the system breaks down, you can build a product perfectly for circularity. And if there's no supply of material, it simply won't work. But on that, the standardized material use enabler that is on the resources is key. There are, in the States alone, there are 50 to 100 recyclers out there, and we all do our own process in a proprietary system. And so really what we need in order to make this system work is we need to know what we're building. We need to know, need to act as a manufacturer and figure out what are we creating for the system to work. In addition, that also ties into the collection side of things. One of the things that was discussed quite a bit on the working group was how are we building our collection network to enable circularity? There are, for certain materials, that are very well known and very popular, you can bring in a sort of what we would call a closed loop system, where we're bringing that material in, we're specifically dismantling it to a manufacturer specific design, and then we're spitting it back out into their upstreams. Or a much more, for the majority of material, you have an open loop system where we bring in, we're currently a collector at retail networks throughout the country. We bring in high volumes of material, and then that needs to, again, be prepared for circularity, but it's not a common consistent flow of material. It's a mix of material that needs to be better prepared. So when we're working with our manufacturer partners and our other suppliers, our downstreams that we're working with them to then bring that material to manufacturer partners, that determination of how the material is coming in is as key as how it's going out.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tasha and David, for bringing to life a few of these enablers. I think we all agree that we could talk for hours about them and how to go about it. But I think this was already very helpful to bring them to life. Thank you very much for this. And as you have highlighted, a variety of different interdependent enablers is actually required to enable circular electronic products. And if we could move to the next slide, we can speak about how developing and companies that develop and market products really can struggle with this complex task of shaping and setting up the enablers in the best way. It almost goes without saying, of course, that the solutions will also have to be very context specific, and they will differ for industries, for market context, and so forth. But what is really important to highlight is that the enablers should not be tackled as an afterthought. I think that's where the working group clearly agreed. Once the product is already on the shelf, basically ready for sales, it's crucial that companies apply circular product lifecycle planning early in the process and manage to synchronize all the relevant functions on a circular value proposition: R&D, procurement, manufacturing, logistics, but also sales, marketing, customer service, and of course, external partners. And when planning the setup of these enablers during lifecycle planning, there are four important overarching considerations for companies. First, where should we set up product-specific elements, and where can we leverage more generic industry solutions? Second, where should and can we find pre-competitive solutions with our peers, and where do we want to operate competitively and potentially establish strategic differentiators? Third, what enablers do we want to establish ourselves by building the capabilities internally, and where do we want to partner and rely on partners to build these enablers? And finally, can we successfully set up these enablers in our current business models? Or do we need to consider developing new business models with potentially new sales models, new distribution channels, and also new revenue streams and cost structures? And also here, the answer will differ from company to company and from context to context, but it will always be crucial to find a systematic approach for tackling them. Now, let's wrap up by talking about the key takeaways and how to use the blueprint. So if you only take away three things, it should be these. First, the blueprint defines circular electronic products by three attributes, including the actual product recovery. Second, It outlines 12 systemic and interdependent enablers that are required to achieve circular products at scale. And third, product lifecycle planning will be a crucial strategy for setting up these enablers. Overall, this will require strong collaborative action. So please contact CEP if you want to join the conversation. And now, how can you actually use the blueprint? We would suggest to first map the blueprint to your specific context in terms of products or markets, for example. This will allow you then to identify the specific system enablers that you should prioritize. And then you could use, for example, platforms as CEP to identify opportunities for collaborative piloting of these enablers. I'm sure that Carolien will speak a little bit more about this later in the session. That's why I would like to close now, thanking again Dave and Tasha for your contributions and for the whole working group for the great collaboration over the past months. Thank you very much, and over to you, Carolien.
Thank you so much. This was super helpful in painting a picture of what is actually in the publication. I hope that this gave our participants enough insight into the thinking and the perspective of the working group, and also leaving them with a healthy dose of curiosity to go download and read the rest of the report, of course. Because we see the system map as a starting point of a conversation rather than an expression of a closed statement, we want to invite everyone with a perspective to the topics to contribute to the discussion moving forward. We're very aware that this represents an industry perspective, which is why we thought it would be interesting to host a multi-stakeholder dialogue today around the system map. First of all, to hear a complementary perspective, and secondly, to explore how the different fields can work together better to make this envisioned system map a reality towards the end of the decade. Our panel today will be led by Jack Barry. He's a research fellow at the Environment and Society program at Chatham House. Jack, are you there?
Yes, hi Carolien, thank you.
Hi there. Thank you for being here with us. Can I ask you to take the honor of introducing our pretty impressive panel?
Excellent. Yes, sure. Thank you, Carolien, and hello to everyone watching online. I'm Dr. Jack Barry. I'm a Circular Economy Research Fellow at Chatham House. And I'm delighted to be moderating this panel session, which will explore the initial reflections from private, public, and academic stakeholders on the report's messages, but also the future of a circular electronics industry. And to do this with me today, we have a stellar lineup of experts. From a perspective on regulation, from the public sector, we've got Garam Bell. Welcome, Garam. Garam is Circular Economy Officer at ITU. And from a perspective from the scientific community, we have Dr. Holger Berg, Vice President of the Circular Economy at Wuppertal Institute. Welcome, Holger. We have Samson Welch, Research Associate, Circular Economy Centre at Cambridge University. And representing the CEP working group, we have Wesley Spindler, Managing Director and Global Circular Economy Lead at Accenture, as well as Jean Cox-Kearns, Chief Sustainability Officer at TESS. So welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us today. Now, first, let's go to the academic and scientific community first, in the context of this session. That's Holger and Sam. So the blueprint presented today and published, developed with CEP member companies across the value chain, represents the industry's vision for the future of circular electronics. But I'd be really keen to get an academic / scientific perception just on the benefits of kind of this collaborative industry-led activities, and in particular, what, from your perspective, what's your takeaway from this blueprint being published? Holger, let me go to you first for your thoughts.
Thanks, Jack. Hello, everyone. First of all, I think let me compliment you on a deep, concise, and really encompassing report. So great job. Thanks again. I think it really shows the importance of a systemic approach, taking in all the levels of the circular economy and showing how important it is to, and that's something I really want to stress, to involve all the actors there. So it's not just industries, for this vision to be successful, you have to involve research, NGOs, regulators, citizens, and consumers for this to really work. And this, I think this is something that also already came up very well in also the presentation before. Let me also stress that from a research perspective, it's really important to address all circular economy strategies from the very beginning, with an emphasis on the upper strategies. So start from not using primary material, from thinking about design, repair, remanufacturing, and maybe deprioritize recycling a bit, which we sometimes tend not to do. You very well work out the current situation of the electronic products economy, which is not altogether splendid in terms of circular economy. So I think it also shows that there is quite a lot of work to do still. And again, that will require cooperation and a coordinated effort by everyone involved. And there is really necessity for acceleration. So based on the report, based on the scenario that you lay out, it's now, I think, really time to follow up and follow through on the plans that are here. So given that we are in the decade for action in many regards of planetary boundaries and protection of the environment, specifically the climate, it's really, this is a great opportunity to work on and work from. And maybe also, if I can make a wish there, include some of the other aspects that have been evolved or developed, for example, by the WBCSD here. So, for example, frugality and earth generatedness of business models would be splendid ideas to also include into this thinking. So, to sum up, really great approach here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Holger. And yeah, decade for action. I completely agree. And I like your call to make the difficult decisions around perhaps deprioritizing recycling. Is not a bit of a loaded phrase, but I get your point around the need to push beyond this reliance on recycling as being the only solution. I think this roadmap really speaks to that element in terms of the systems surrounding the design of circular products. So thank you, Holger. And Sam, perhaps you want to pick up where Holger left off there.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Jack. And I also echo as well, thank you very much to the team for inviting myself and Holger to come and have the opportunity to see what you're working on and give our thoughts. It was very exciting to see this initiative, and it's very exciting to see collaborative work happening in a sector. And I think, electronics especially, it's a sector that requires quite a lot of effort in terms of circularity. I know Carolien already mentioned some very important figures. And we always say, at the University of Cambridge, we also say that waste is not just an environmental loss, it's also an economic loss, right? So there's lots of value being lost in the electronic waste that's going out into the world today. I think it's been said really well that circularity is not a single company and not a single product model, it's a system model. I think that's been well articulated. And that's where this kind of work is very important. This kind of collaborative work we feel is very important because you have these complex many-to-many interdependencies between actors in the sector, and you need to have this shared vision to rally around. You need to have a shared vision, the shared principles, the shared definition, the shared ambitions to rally everyone around, which can then enable subsequent work. What are the enabling standards? What are the enabling business models and policies, business models as Holger mentioned as well. So I think that's just one of the power of the work that's been done here, which is it's quite a good North Star for the sector to build around. And I'll just mention maybe three things I thought was quite powerful about this particular piece of work, which is one, obviously the systems approach. I think that's been said quite many times. In particular, you consider the role of multiple actors, such as the role of the consumer, which is a very important aspect of this whole thing. The second one is this, I think it was attribute 3, which is the actual recovery. So this idea of circularity in use. So it's all well and good if we design things to be circular, but they're not actually circular until they actually are used and in a circular way. So that's a very powerful principle to have, an attribute. And the third thing as well is the mention of importance of infrastructure, so standards and data and systems and so on. And I think that would then open the door for further deliberations around business models and standards and systems. So it's good to have this rallying, this North Star to say, this is what we're trying to achieve as a sector, as an industry, and what do we need to enable that to happen? And I'll steal Holger's word again to say it is the decade of action, so we need to move quite a bit. So those are my initial thoughts, and I'll pause there.
Thanks, Sam. And yeah, I think this blueprint provides that shared vision, and the next challenge is to go to shared definitions and standards. And more the devil's in the detail with this, right? So I think you're very on point there, and this blueprint is the start of that progress. So moving on, in the circular electronic system mapped out in the blueprint, there's several recurring kind of key themes weaved in, and these range from consumer behavior, as you mentioned, Sam, innovation, new business models, policy and regulation, and one particular one that jumped out to me is supporting digital infrastructure. And it's clear from this blueprint that digital innovation and digital infrastructure really underpins this vision for a circular electronic system. So my question to the panel is, what are some of the future technologies that are needed for this circular system to become a reality? What innovation breakthrough solutions do we expect to see in the next decade? And where is there still gaps in the technology? Where is it lacking? So maybe I could start with you, Sam, and then maybe move on to Wesley from an industry perspective on this point.
Well, thank you, Jack. I think that's a very important question, and we really believe that digitalization is a key enabler. If we want to enable circular flows of materials and resources and products, we need to also have circular flows of data. Right? If we talk about reuse of materials, reuse of products and resources, we also need to think about reuse of data to enable those kind of processes to happen. Right. So, and I think that's encapsulated quite well in the 3 attributes in this particular model here. Someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Timo who mentioned about provenance. So if you want to be able to enable circular reuse of a product, you need to know provenance, what kind of resources have gone into it, composition, attribute tree, what operating conditions, has it been repaired, what kind of cycles, what's the circular potential for it, what kind of recyclability or remanufacturing. All this information needs to move along the ecosystem as well with these products and resources. And in traditional linear supply chains, the data flow is quite broken. That's one of the big issues today. A lot of this information may exist, but they exist in silos. They may exist with the manufacturer, service provider, and so on. And so that's something that needs to be fixed. And so I think that's a very important question. And if I were to mention sort of 3 areas, we can mention many, but maybe just to highlight 3 key areas where digitalization is needed to enable this. The first one I'll say is enabling those circular flows of data and information. So think about systems such as product passports that flow with these information. Think about enabling infrastructure such as materials databases that gives us all this information about these kind of resources and products. Think about systems that will enable provenance and tracking across supply chains. So that's one. The second one I would say is market infrastructure. So what is the infrastructure that we need? When I say market infrastructure, think about things such as marketplaces for the trading and flows of secondary resources and materials, right, to enable that to happen. Think about platforms that enable matching or algorithms that enable matching between company organizations with materials and organizations that can do something useful with that. So that's the market infrastructure side of things that can then enable further, say, price discovery and matching, which would then enable market forces to help this thing scale up. And the third thing I mentioned, actually, which I find very fascinating as well, is the ability to use computational methods to help us discover and develop new materials as well. And so there's some fascinating work being happening in the field of, say, computational biology or computational chemistry to look at not only discovery of new materials, but also discovery of new processes to enable us, for example, to recover materials in a much more efficient way. So these are, and under these, you can think about all these technologies and buzzwords. You think about, machine learning, IoT, blockchain, what have you. All these are tools, but fundamentally, I think these are three very, very interesting areas. There's some interesting work that's happening, but as maybe a call to action to the industry as well, there needs to be more work and more development that needs to happen in these spaces.
Thanks, Sam. And these areas, they're not decades away, right? There's people working on this right now. It's not in maturity, but you've got battery passports coming to the fore. You've got blockchain, several different blockchain experiments across whole value chains around the world. You've got blockchain data protocols being developed. So things are starting to bubble to the surface in these areas, but there needs to be more collaboration. That's your point, more collaboration around these areas. So thank you, Sam. And this moves on nicely to Wesley. Now, Wesley, we know that Accenture works with a wide range of companies who are tackling some of the digitization challenges associated with implementing circular business models. I was wondering if you could provide some reflections on the impact that those digital technologies can have on solving some of those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Today I think we really see constant technological progress really enabling new opportunities at an exponential rate that we've never seen before. And with these new waves of innovation making previous technologies obsolete and requiring organizations to really be proactive in staying up to date. And I think the twinning of technology and sustainability is really what will take us through the next decade ahead up to 2030 and beyond. And when we think about disruptive technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, they really are, to some of the points Sam made, one of the most important enablers in accelerating the move to circular and making it economically attractive. And it is very critical to think about digital, but also physical and biological technologies as well. And all of those types of technologies can provide value individually. But we've also, in our work through the Circular Economy Handbook and our work at Accenture with our partners, we've seen that the most competitive businesses actually deploy a combination of different types of technologies to achieve the best performance at speed and scale. Just to give a couple examples to really bring this to life, I love the example of AMP Robotics, which uses robotic machine visioning and advanced AI to power a robot. Their high-speed robotic system has precisely automates the identification, sorting, and processing of material streams for organizations that recycle municipal waste, e-waste, construction waste, and other types. And I would echo as well some of the points Sam made and you mentioned around the Internet of Materials and product passports for the electronics industry being really promising and very impactful. I love the example in this space of Circularize, a blockchain-enabled platform that helps suppliers and chemicals, plastics, battery materials, metals, and other industries to share the environmental footprint of materials securely. And I think the exciting thing to sort of go off the back of the comments already shared is these solutions aren't theoretical. These solutions work, and we see them being implemented already in many different ways. So there are examples that are perhaps smaller scale, but the solutions work. So it is about, how do we fit the pieces together to really scale over the coming years and see these as a true enabler of developing a circular electronic system and really enabling disruptive change in the way we do business today.
Yeah, thanks, Wesley. And I completely agree with your point around there's many of these disruptive platform technologies, both physical and biological. How these integrate together is the big question, not just in one company, but across a whole value chain. That's the real challenge. And you mentioned Circularize there as a really perfect example of stitching together data transfer across a whole supply chain, mapping material flows. There's many other services out there doing that. So thanks very much for your experience on that. So moving on, we know we just discussed the technological and to some extent business model innovation before. That's critical to achieve this vision. And Sam, Wesley, you both made that quite clear. But turning to the role of the public sector, what do you think regulation plays in enabling this circular electronic system? And perhaps Holger, I'll go to you, and then I'll move on to Garen from ITU.
Well, I think what we've been seeing, what we still require from regulators, is to provide the right impulses to set the stage for circular economy to work and to be established. And I think, for example, we see this quite well around the circular economy strategies, also for electronics that are now being established around the European Green Deal. And I think what's required is to set clear and reliable and really long-term oriented rules and guardrails that, you know, enable everyone else to create their meaningful circular economy strategies. I think it's also a role of the regulators right now to establish the required practices, or help establishing the required practices and technologies that we need for circular economy. And the digital product passport, for example, has already been mentioned, which I think is an important case in point. What I would also like to stress is that there is some important role for industries and sectors' own sort of regulation in the forms of norms and standard setting, which is extremely important to to establish cycles of products and materials within sectors, within industries, so that everyone knows how to work and deal with a certain material. So we should not let this kind of, let's say, self-regulation out of the focus.
Thanks, Holger. And yeah, the role of regulators to establish practices and technologies. So rather than being restrictive, they should be supportive, enabling to facilitate and encourage this type of collaboration, not overly restrictive. I think that's a really important point. Moving on to you, Garen, because I know working with you in the past, ITU and yourself, you work very closely in the detail of developing this enabling regulatory environment, particularly on EPR. What are your thoughts around the role of regulation in supporting delivering this vision?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jack, and thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak. Maybe it's, yeah, I mean, I can answer your question. Maybe it's important just to first say that in the electronic waste space, about 40% of countries in the world have a regulation or a policy or a law governing the management of electronic waste. But that's 40%, but within that 40%, there are very few instruments that are actually legally binding, have even been implemented beyond cabinet or parliamentary approval, and that are also even enforced. But I think I completely agree with what's been said, and also by yourself and Holger, that regulation shouldn't be seen necessarily as something that comes with connotations of enforcement and stipulation and these kind of words, because really it's like when ITU is working with governments to develop, help them develop regulation, like you said, around EPR for electronics, we ensure to bring in the industry's voice as early as possible and to support the government in how to do that. Because that is one of the, I think, the challenges that's been faced in the past, is that it's a kind of, yeah, top-down approach, but actually it's a mutual exercise in this sense. Maybe also to add, just to build off what Holger was saying, when he mentioned the digital product passports and regulation, I think what regulation can do is, let's say in a text format, in a written down format, is allow everyone in the system to kind of understand what their role is or what their responsibility is. And that's not just for the digital product passports. It's also for EPR, for example, the concept of EPR, and maybe also for governments themselves, the development of regulation in this sense, in this space, it's also a learning exercise as well, to understand, okay, what is our role, what actually does a producer do, and what is a recycler doing, etc. Maybe also just to finish, I think, and I can say a few more things later if there is the opportunity, I think, regulation is not just about setting roles and responsibilities, but it's an opportunity to create a level playing field. So those that actually want to do, let's say honest business in a sector, it's an opportunity it reduces the risk, let's say, ideally, and it gives them more confidence to make investments in such a space. Yeah, back to you, Jack. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Karen. I think that last point is really key. It provides a level playing field, reduces the risk of undercutting, and provides surety to drive investment. And Jean, I'd like to pick up on Garen's stat around very few, although 40% governing management of e-waste, but very few have got to the point of really strong enforcement. I was wondering what your thoughts are coming from an industry side, the role of regulation in this.
Yeah, I mean, regulation is generally the output of consultation and inputs, and will generally, when implemented, create a level playing field. That's exactly what you want. The interesting thing though is that you have good actors that will follow regulation, and then you have bad actors or others that won't, and that's really why I think we see greater than 80% of material in the e-waste monitor going to informal recycling. And no matter how much you pin down or tie down regulation, if people know they can avoid it, there is a tendency to do that. So definitely enforcement of regulation is one thing that is important. And there isn't a lot of enforcement right now of waste movement regulation, whether it's within a country or across border. So regulation is definitely one tool, but it can't be the only one. We need to have a lot of innovation, I think, and creativity around the business models that are existing and how they align to legislation. I mean, and again, this comes back to typically, you make and you sell a product, and the only way to sort of keep that product in circulation or within your reach at its end of life is to have interest in it along the way. And currently today, there's an invested interest in a lot of cases in the first life. But if in the circular economy, we're trying to maximize of every product right down through parts and components, then typically models like today, leasing or selling a service rather than a product needs much more thought and much more consultation and discussion, because these models need to get much more creative beyond first life and work in collaboration then with regulation.
Thanks, Jean. And 80% going to an informal management. I want to pick up on that maybe after this around the just transition element of that fact. But Wesley, maybe you could pick up on Jean's final point there around the importance of business models, but the challenges there, but also the opportunities maybe in terms of financial performance of implementing such models.
Yeah, absolutely. And, coming off the back of that, of course, regulation is a key driver or barrier for organizations thinking about new models and methods for circularity. And, we've been working with our clients on circular to unlock the value for the best part of the last decade or more. And the case for circularity is becoming increasingly clear across industry. And we're seeing more and more clients want to innovate for circularity around new business models and, taking those models from pilots and small scale programs into global scale, whether that's secondhand model, products as a service, or take back, all which are really relevant to the electronics industry. Those are becoming more and more frequent for organizations in terms of where they're looking to go. But of course, the business need and economics of the products and services in question have a big role to play in what decisions get made around those. In any case, we really see the business case for circularity improving considerably. To give a different industry example, the automotive industry, some new research by the World Economic Forum and Accenture found that by shifting to a fully circular value chain, the industry could increase profitability by 1.5 times and enable revenues 15 to 20 times the vehicle sales price, which is pretty substantial. And this increased profitability will be due to unlocking new circular value pools, mainly in as-a-service models, leasing and subscriptions, car sharing, mobility as a service, and life cycle services as well. So remanufacturing, repair, and recycling to maximize the use value of a car. Different industry, but also highly applicable within the electronics sector. And we're seeing a lot of this movement in the electronics sector as well, from things like take-back programs for diversion and recycling, often in anticipation for regulatory compliance, for example, or also, to find new engagement methods for customers. And the business cases around these are difficult. Being realistic, it takes time. It takes economies of scale. It takes new investments in infrastructure, capabilities, technologies, and so on to make these work. But with time and after the first years, we are seeing these economies of scale kick in, and seeing also alongside that positive impact on things like reputational risk, brand value, and more. So I think sort of dealing with end of use is one side. And then we're also seeing new sales models become more important in the industries, such as a service, which has been mentioned, repair, those sorts of models really being prioritized as key components of a successful and well-rounded portfolio. When we're thinking about our, the way we're asking customers to consume. And again, those not only support circularity, but the teams within, marketing and sales and commerce are seeing these drive customer loyalty, enable better customer experiences, and increase customer adoption. So I think to really accelerate the transition, we need these groundbreaking models and innovations to change the game. And we need to stop talking about incremental shifts and start thinking about how do we truly shift those value chains, ecosystems to really make these models not just a small part of business as usual, but the new way of doing business.
Brilliant. Thanks, Wesley. And I'm conscious of time, but I think this is a really important point to follow on. The blueprint describes the circular future of electronics, but it doesn't necessarily describe in detail the transition to that future system. And we've kind of learned from the renewable energy transition is that if it's not done in an inclusive and just manner, then it can experience serious delays, public opposition, and examples include kind of induced job loss or displacement, or the disproportional costs borne by SMEs in emerging economies in adapting to these business models and building these infrastructures. So the real question to the panel is, how do we ensure that this global vision, this global transition to a circular electronic system is just and equitable at the same time? We only have a few minutes. Sam, very briefly, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that is a very, very, very important question. And I think it's very important to remember that, the lives of millions of people in these developing and emerging economies are implicated in these supply chains, not just as manufacturers or consumers, but also think about the end of life issues that are being faced there. Think about micro SMEs and informal economies and waste management and context recycling. Think about issues for electronics, for example, health and safety and hazardous materials. And so, maybe connect. So the question is, how do we protect their welfare and their interests, and also make sure that they can get a share of the pie, right? The share of this $1 trillion opportunity of circularity. And maybe very briefly, just connecting to what I was saying earlier, using digitalization as an example. So digitalization can be very inclusive, but there's also a danger of exclusion if you're not designing systems to be fit for purpose for these communities who are going to be using them as well, right? So you can talk about fancy blockchains and smartphone apps and so on, but can these be used and accessed by the informal economy actors or micro SMEs on the ground who may be involved in these supply chains? And so, I think that if I were to say there are three main things that I always think about. So one is that as we design these systems and solutions, do we design them for fit for purpose for the context of these communities as well? And some of the best solutions are, if you think about some of the best inclusive solutions, such as M-Pesa is the one that comes to mind. Some of you may know in Kenya, and how it was designed to be used for the most basic, SMS-based phones. And so thinking about those kind of things in terms of design of systems and solutions. Second one is making sure we also focus on building capacity, including, for example, building infrastructure. And infrastructure can be hard infrastructure in terms of connectivity, but it can also be soft infrastructure in terms of skills and knowledge. And the third one I think is very important is also making sure there's representation in these dialogues that we have, right? So as we're having these discussions about standards and systems and solutions, are we including the voice of these communities and making sure their needs are captured as well in these discussions? I think that's very, very important.
Yeah,
I'll stop right there.
Thanks, Sam. And I'm aware that many of the panelists and the CEP members themselves think about this as well, and are already on this. I won't be able to go through everyone else's responses just because of time, but if you have thoughts on this from the panel members, please type it in the chat, your response to everyone attending. And I'd like to move on now, given the kind of forward-looking nature of the system map. CEP is actually engaged with the World Economic Forum City Shapers, which is a global community of youth leaders in the circular economy, to reflect on the content in the report and contribute with some questions to the panel. So on the call, we should have Margherita Barbieri. Margherita, are you there? And if so, please go ahead and ask your question to the panel.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks for having us and for the opportunity to ask questions to the panel. Thank you, first of all, for highlighting the importance of the electronics sector to reduce its impact through a circular economy. My question is about the role the sustainability reporting could have in accelerate the transition of this industry, and what are the challenges associated with it. We do know the importance of have common metrics and indicators in general within circular economy. So my question is, in particular for electronics industry, is there any specific reporting, standardization or metrics that could support the transition of the industry? Thank you.
Thanks, Margherita. So if I was to summarize, what's the role of sustainability reporting in accelerating this vision? How important is it to have metrics and indicators? And is there any out there right now that we can learn about and go and research? Holger, if I could come to you, and then perhaps either Wesley or Jean, if you want to pitch in from an industry side.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Margherita. Let me start with the metric.
Oh, I think we've maybe lost you, Holger, lost your sound. So maybe if you try and sort that out, and we maybe go to Wesley or Jean.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think I'm not sure what Holger was going to say in terms of examples, but I think sustainability reporting is really important. And really important also to have common metrics and indicators. And I think there's still a lot of development needed for that. The focus of sustainability reporting is, it varies a lot today with lots of different tools and ways that you can do it. But I think in accelerating the circular economy, there's lots of data points. There's lots of data capturing what's being recycled, what isn't, what's being treated informally, as we know, the likes of the e-waste monitor. But I think what we really need here are really ambitious goals from companies that are stating, how much material is being reused, how much they want to reuse by when, And what are the obstacles to doing that? So it's not, I'm absolutely not pointing the finger at OEMs. I think they're all making great commitments, but it's I think the reporting needs to be what stops them from achieving the goals that they want to achieve, or from not setting more ambitious goals. And I think that is, being able to capture the flows, where they're able to get sustainability of supply, where the challenges are in getting that consistent supply. So yes, reporting is needed, and I don't think we're there yet with the best reporting for the circular economy.
And if I could just add one thing to that, I'm at the UN General Assembly this week, and this is something that's come up again and again. I think the piece around, what are the standards for circularity? What's the framework for measurement, right? And what does it mean to be a circular organization? And also, what's sort of our guiding light around what we're aiming as a global system around circular, for different sectors, as well as for public sector organizations. And those have different layers, but I think each of those need to be solved for, right? What's our 1.5 degrees for circular? Right, we don't have that. And then underneath that comes, again, frameworks for measurement, as well as standards, as well as reporting, and then the tools and technology needed to get there. So I think it's a critical question. And I think it's actually something that Accenture and others in this room are working on within the platform for accelerating the circular economy, around how do we set that overarching standard and think about measurements, reporting, so on, in a much more sophisticated, collaborative, as well as standardized way.
Thanks, Wesley. Holger, I think you're back in the room. So we only have one minute or so.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. So first of all, Jean, thanks for stepping in. I didn't realize I wasn't to be heard. Very quickly on metrics and indicators, Margaret. One thing that we need them urgently for is to know that we're heading into the right direction. We need to make sure that the things that we can measure, the things that we do, that they're actually the right things to do, and that the circular practices that we use and apply are actually more resource efficient, more energy efficient, more beneficial for sustainability than the things that we've done before. And that isn't a given all the time.
Thanks, Holger. And it's worth saying to Margarita, there is various metrics and indicators already out there, whether you've got Circulytics from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation or World Business Council's circular transition indicators. You've got the ISO TC 323 being developed right now. You've got the EU developing its E5 standard on reporting for circularity, and the green finance taxonomy coming through, which will also drive reporting. So there's a whole world out there of different developments which are starting to emerge and blend together. So it's a complex environment right now. In the interest of time, because Carolien, I'm sure you want to finish on time, I'd like to go to our other youth leader, Tunç Karabaya. I hope I pronounced that okay. Tunç, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity and this amazing report and the panel. I'll just quickly move on my question to not to waste your time. My question is that how would you describe the current pace for circular transition in the electronics industry? Do you think that this report, this blueprint, will fast track this transition process on its own, or should we need to integrate other stakeholders like governments, NGOs, academia, and consumers? And if your answer is yes, how should we integrate the other stakeholders to the transition process, and how those stakeholders benefit from this blueprint to understand their responsibilities? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tunç. So is it going fast enough? And if not, and also importantly, how do we include a wider set of stakeholders going forward after this vision has been produced? Does anyone want to pick this up in a minute or two? Jean.
Do I think it's going fast enough? No. No. Will this report help? I think this report has brought together a great group of companies to collaborate, to design it. I think there is great foundation coming in this report, and it definitely will help. but I think there is huge, I mean, I think there are so many organizations and companies and initiatives all doing so much, but I still don't think it's fast enough given the reports and the things that we see out there in terms of climate change and weather and natural disasters and people now going hungry. I think this whole thing needs to be faster, so it needs a lot of attention.
Thanks, Jean. And it's a great question, Tunç, and it's probably the reason this whole group got together in the first place, to try and build this vision. So hats off to the group to get to this point. And if I may, Carolien, just wrap up from the panel session before I hand back over to you. Just to say thanks to the panel members for the responses, and also Margarita's and Tunç's questions. I think there's some very clear points made. I think everyone's generally in agreement about the points that are made as well. First off is that the blueprint is a kind of North Star for industries and governments to work collectively together. That need for collective working together is shone through. There's particular specific areas that really need collective effort, transboundary and across value chain collaboration, particularly development of widespread uptake of enabling digital technologies and services, such as product passports, which perform the critical role of tracking the flow of materials through the circular product's lifetime. But equally, regulation, standardization, particularly metrics and reporting, which is Margarita's question, will play a key role in ensuring a level playing field for all the supply chain actors. And Garam touched on EPR as being a prime example of that. However, we also need to ensure that such regulations can actually be properly enforced, which is challenging when considering the transboundary kind of cross-jurisdictional challenges that the electronics industry faces. And the final point is that, and an important one I think, is that this transition needs to be just, needs to be inclusive, and it needs to be equitable if it's going to succeed. Otherwise, it risks further exacerbating human environmental injustices. And I think everyone in the room is aware of that. And that's the challenge going forward with this vision. So on that, I'll pass back over to Carolien to sum up.
Thank you so much, Jack, and thank you all the panelists. This was an amazing opportunity to have heard from all of you on the topics presented. I will not do a wrap-up of the session as Jack just did that. I wish we had longer time to elaborate on your question, Tunç, because I think there's a lot of critical questions being asked. We will take all those topics and all those questions. How can we facilitate that collaboration, and how can we put that under the CEP umbrella? That's a huge question, and we will definitely benefit from the context that we have made here and see how we can leverage those in the future. Just a very quick word from me on to reiterate how CEP plans to use this work moving forward. First of all, having been able to align, to arrive at this perspective together with all our member companies was incredibly valuable for our mutual understanding of what we're working towards. This blueprint will really serve for us internally as the North Star, which will guide us in all the projects that we do in our response to our roadmap. Secondly, we hope this is a good starting point for a dialogue with stakeholders, be it in the industry or in academia, policymaking, civil society, or others. We see this as a living document that can be discussed and updated in a decade to come, based on new insights and based on new developments. We invite you to take part in that continuous process. So please, if you're interested in that, do reach out. Finally, as Timo mentioned, we hope this work can serve for companies in the industry to understand better where the industry will want to move and how their organization can adapt to fit into this system. I know this was a very long and dense session. There was a lot of information that was shared, and we thank you dearly for making it to the end of it. We hope it was informative. We hope that it sparked further interest to download and go look at the rest of the blueprint. We really hope that you do. I would really like to express my great gratitude for all the speakers who joined us today. Thank you so much for your help in understanding this transition better. I want to thank you all to all those who have contributed to the work over the past year. It really was quite a journey. I want to thank Rally, without whom this whole event would have actually never been possible. Thank you so much, Rally. And finally, I would like to thank you all for dialing in and joining us for this ride. We'd love to hear from you. Don't hesitate to get in touch. I wish you all a great day and goodbye. Till next time.